Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the what would be a late lunch and learn for those in mainland Europe. If you're on the east coast of America, it probably is an early lunch today. We've got a session which was headed small and mighty. It's talking about segmentation studies. We've got Benji from ETABS who's going to start things off, and Paul's going to tell us. Paul Carney's going to tell us his story about the work he's done around automation of large-scale reporting. The session is being recorded, as you probably know. And for those of you who's joined, if you wouldn't mind putting your microphones on mute during the session, and if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat, or you can save them to the end. There should be a few minutes for asking questions, and if you save your questions to the end, you can come off mute, or you can put them in the chat, and I'll ask them. With that, I'll hand over to Benji.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for joining today, wherever in the world you may be, and a special warm welcome to fellow ICG members. So I'm Benjamin from ETABS, and I'm joined by Paul Carney from Clear-Cut Insights. And what we're going to look at today is Paul's success story with using automation to replicate sets of segmentation slides over and over using ETABS automation service, and then I'll come back on the webinar and just explain a few of the concepts and platform in practice, and summarize, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. So please hold on to those. Mike, should questions be put into a chat box, or are they live?
Put them into the chat. The ICG folk on here and the other people who are joining us. If you put the questions in the chat, I'll pick them out, and if we've got time, we'll go through all of them at the end.
Great. And the session will be recorded in case anyone wants to save taking notes. Okay, so over to Paul. Thank you.
Hey, hi everyone. So yeah, I just wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about how we've used ETABS on a recent project. We've been using them for a long time. Well, I've been using them for years and years, and yeah, just wanted to talk a little bit about how we use them for segmentations. A few of you might know that Clearcut, we kind of specialize in segmentation. It's 80-90% of what we do. I've personally worked on hundreds of segmentations over too many years to mention, really. But you probably also know that a lot of segmentations sit on shelves and gather dust, and all of those cliches around being difficult to land internally. And I think one of the reasons for that is because they can be incredibly complicated and detailed in terms of their outputs. And sometimes you just run out of time or enthusiasm or money to actually get to understand what each of the segments is and does, and actually understand the implications of them. So we've used ETABS and automation to, crank that handle and make that a much more efficient process, really, to make sure that it's not overwhelming for us, but also the end clients as well. And we ran a recent project for PZ Cussons, two separate segmentations, actually, in two different categories, one in hand washing and one in showering and bathing. The client wanted them running in parallel, so we had to report slightly staggered, but effectively two different segmentation studies, two different teams, two different sets of deliverables, but really landing them at the same time, or quite a similar time. So that was a particular challenge. One of the other things that we did was we ran, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this terminology before, what we call where to play and how to win workshops. The where to play workshop was really about understanding the segments and then understanding where the optimum priorities were for the client, and then shortly after that, running how to win workshops, where we go away and we understand the particular targets in a lot more detail, and then feed that into strat planning so they can figure out what to do themselves as well. And as is always the case, they had tight budgets, but they wanted a lot of data, but they all wanted it condensed down as well into a very tight timeline. So yeah, ultimately we wanted to make sure that the outputs looked really good, nice and visual, something that's easy for people to pick up and use, but then had that depth that they could go back to over the years after that as well. Okay, so bit cheesy, but the study itself was what we say simple by default, complex by design, and slightly even more cheesy. That's how I've worked with ETABS over the years. If I'm really honest, there's a huge amount of power under the hood of the stuff that they've got. I've worked with a lot of software where it feels like it's been tacked together. I don't get that impression at all from ETABS. Everything has a purpose. Everything feels like it works reasonably well in terms of just being able to make sure that everything runs exactly how it should, and it feels really well designed. So just a quick compliment there to whoever designed the software effectively. Um, but also um, it can automate a lot more than I thought it would be able to. We had 16 slides of info for each of the segments that we looked at. Each of those 16 slides had multiple charts on it. Not all of them were bar charts. Some of them were, all sorts of different charts that you could imagine, scatter plots, pie charts, everything in there. And it involved ranking, sorting, indices, and all of that can be automated from Benjamin's team as well. They can use your existing data tables. The process means that we effectively give them a templated output and a set of our existing data tables, and they do the rest. Their bureau service effectively just picks that up and and runs everything. There's a bit of iteration backwards and forwards about what we mean and what and how it happens. But honestly, it's a really streamlined, simplified, and efficient process as well. As I've mentioned there, you can do all sorts of different calculations um, and things in PowerPoint. We give them like a translation file, so we have long text for attributes, and we truncate that down to something that fits in the slides. You can give them logos and icons, and we can move those around the slide as well. So it's really powerful in terms of being able to automate. I'd say 95% of what we do. There's always a little bit of around the edges that we have to do as well. And then the final point is a really important one. Rather than checking everything, you can check one segment in detail. You can then spot check all of the segments to make sure that it's been applied properly and accurately across all of them. But as long as one segment is correct, then you can be very confident that everything is correct. And I guarantee if anyone sat down and did 14 segments, each with 16 slides across two different studies, there will be human error involved and there will be a lot of it. So, this is a much more accurate way of being able to go through it. And honestly, it's more interesting. No one wants to have to do all of that handle cranking if you can effectively set it up and set it running and let it go and it does it.
Yeah.
Hmm. Actually, before we move on to that, sorry, Benjamin, I forgot one thing there. I think a lot of the time when I worked in my previous company, I worked with some people who said, "Is it really worth doing this? Because we've only got one country, we've only got one set of segmentation. Surely we can just do this ourselves, and that might actually be quicker than automating it and then doing it." And to that, I would say three things. One is, first of all, people change their mind. Clients, us, a lot of things can change. Whether it's weighting, whether it's cutting the data in different ways, whether it's resegmenting, and as soon as you change your mind on any of those things, the last thing you want to be doing is recharting everything from scratch again. And this is literally I don't know, 1 hour, 2 hour process to get everything back with you again in terms of being able
Oui,
to
ça va?
on that. Oh, sorry, was there a
D'accord.
question? Okay, no worries. Where was I? I can't remember. Anyway, that's fine. Sorry, carry on. Sorry, Benjamin.
About the decision of doing it by hand, if it's just one country or one segment.
Yeah, so I would always, even if it may take slightly longer to do it using this process, it just gives you that peace of mind that anything else that you need to want to do in the future, whether it's, I mean, for PZ, we did this in the UK and we've subsequently done it in Indonesia. We're now looking at doing something for a different category for the same client, and we can use the same template. Obviously, things change, but it's still a much, much quicker process than starting from scratch. So it's just yeah, it's just take the effort up front and you'll be rewarded. The other thing actually I've reminded now is interim data. A lot of the time, timings are short. I might run some analysis on interim data, and then once we get the full data, again, you can apply everything to the analysis, but also then actually create the slides in a matter of a day or two, rather than starting from scratch and charting everything up. So that truncates the timeline a little bit as well. And then the last thing is kind of what this gave us as an agency, and what it gave PZ as well in terms of the outcomes. We didn't spend very much time cranking those handles, and spent way more time than we would normally understanding the segments, reporting those segments back to the clients, understanding implications, creating brand scorecards so they could see where their current good behavior, good performance was compared to where they should actually be performing much better. So it saved time for us. It gave us and the client much more confidence that the reporting was accurate. It meant that we could work across both of those categories in parallel. I don't think we would have done this project in parallel if we hadn't used ETABS. We focused on telling the story of each of the segment. We had this big pack of information that we could give out to people if necessary, but actually we summarized everything down into 2-3 pages per segment rather than a big deck of data. And finally, and importantly, we just enjoyed it a lot more than us sat here just beavering away in the background using Excel and PowerPoint. So yeah, that's me. Back over to you, Benjamin.
Thank you, Paul. It's great when you add that extra meat to the story, which is the happiness factor that people don't necessarily think about as a benefit. But it literally does. We see a lot of smiles after people get back their decks so quickly, and they can then sort of start thinking about what the numbers mean. So yeah, thanks again, Paul. So ETABS, for those of you not come across us, we're industry leaders in when it comes to like automation and data visualization for market research, and we've won a number of awards over the years, which is obviously a great accolade and testimony to what we're doing and how we're going about it. Let me explain to you how the paradigm works, and often that just helps to cement the concept and how it can really apply to many different types of projects. So we can start with any existing template, and that template for the outputs could either be PowerPoint, that usually is, even Excel, Word, and now Google Slides, Google Sheets as well, which is making an entry. Should we say it's a slow entry, but it's there. And if any Google type clients are your clients, then it makes a big difference. And after matching up the appropriate values from the data sources, typically SPSS or just crosstabs in Excel, could be one file, could be lots of files, could be lots of work. Basically, we as part of the setup, we're matching the data from here in the Excel goes into this chart here, here goes into this chart here, and so on. And then once that's set up once, and now you think about the context of what Paul's talking about in terms of segmentation, so then the automation kicks in and will then run off a copy of a deck for each of those 14, in this case, segment reports, because they're all following that same structure, putting in the data from the Excel, put it into the PowerPoint, next slide, and so on, and then that's done. So it's not just charts, it could be summary tables, text boxes, or even bringing in brand logos, different competitor brands, flags, whatever they may be, indicators to show significance testing, perhaps. Every item can be automated. And once populated, all the data in those objects remain native PowerPoint or Google, and therefore editable after the automation is finished. So you can always make changes, or clients can make changes, labels, or whatever it may be, chart types, post-automation. And it's not just about being able to pull data into your traditional charts. Nowadays, there's a global trend to leverage infographics and data visualization techniques for clearer storytelling. And it's also possible to have data-driven maps, therefore, auto-sized images, proportionally filled images, and brand logos, like you can see in some of these examples on the slide. word clouds, dials, even dynamically changing signals and smiley faces that adjust, a smile to a sad face depending on the values, that type of thing. So it's all driven by the data, and again, it's all there to save time. And, yeah, and the sheer amount of time it would have taken to make, adjust, or resize these types of infographics manually just doesn't bear thinking, especially when you then have to repeat that process 14 times or every month, every quarter, whatever it may be. So, which types of projects suit automation best? I like to recommend considering any project that is repetitive in some way. So, the first type, obviously, that comes to mind would be trackers or other continuous studies, whether it's monthly, quarterly, yearly, whatever the cadence, you're guaranteed to see a generous ROI. Of course, the first time you implement the automation, there's that investment of time to set up and prime the pump. But keeping that focus on how wonderful life will be next wave, or the next market, when your entire deck gets populated in a matter of seconds or minutes, that's really where the true happiness factor is going to come in. Also, bear in mind, automation doesn't have to be all or nothing. So even if a percentage of questions slides may change over time, you can still automate, say, the core 80% of the project that remains consistent and save yourself 80% of the reporting time. If anyone here has a tracker where they're collecting the data on an ongoing basis, monthly, let's say, but then physically able to do the reporting quarterly, then with the automation in place, it makes no difference whether you're pressing that update button once a quarter or once a month. It's the same couple of minutes to update a whole deck. And that's sort of what Paul was saying in terms of, setting off, getting all going all interim data, and then a few moments later you've got the whole deck repopulated with final data. Or if there was a mistake in the weighting, just drop in the new data file and rerun the automation. So it's a bit of an insurance policy in a way. So you really have got a lot of bang for your buck, if you like. Now, next up would be multi-country studies, multi-markets, where the same deck needs to be replicated across a series of regions or countries. And our approach to automation can handle varying brand lists between markets and therefore be set to adjust according to those variations. In a similar vein, concept tests or ad tests could also benefit from having a standardized template that can be rerun each time there's a new test and adjust itself automatically to handle different scenarios between runs. Segmentation, of course, like Paul said, where the same set of slides is repeated across different segments, brands, across products, categories, whatever it may be. And simply set up that automation on the core set of slides, and then they get replicated across all those segments. And finally, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction studies, where you need the same report generated for multiple stores, departments, teams, individuals even. You just set up one template and then it can be replicated hundreds, if not thousands, of times. Now, the same concept of automation doesn't just have to be a case of I'm pulling data from Excel and putting it into PowerPoint. We can apply it with data that's coming in, let's say, over the web, over the cloud from a dashboard like Power BI or Tableau. Now, those are systems that are great data visualization, BI dashboard systems, but they fail market researchers in particular when the end consumer of the PowerPoint wants to have something editable. So they'll just give you an image of the dashboard, and that's not particularly helpful. So to address that, we extended our automation to an online platform with an API connector so that users can click export on their dashboard, whatever dashboard they're using, and then within seconds they'll get back an editable PowerPoint version of that same dashboard. It just adds so much more value and gives more flexibility to what could be done with the outputs. And while we've got our heads up in the cloud there, we can now incorporate, I should say, AI-generated analysis and commentary within these types of reports. We can either do it as part of the automation or it can be applied on any deck of PowerPoint, in fact. So essentially, a few examples here. You see the box at the top of the screen. That text inside there was generated by applying OpenAI on the numbers in the chart on the slide, all in a few seconds, really. Very effective, and of course, very, very accurate as well, partly due to only pulling data from the tables in this study rather than outside sources, and therefore, you never know what hallucinations might come out of out of AI. But here, that's not going to be the case, and the data is secure. It's just your data, your project. It's not shared. It's not used by the AI system to improve the model or anything like that. So, how can you engage with ETABS? So we have a couple of options. Either if you've got the volume of projects, you could use a license from us. We give you the training, we give you the support, and you can then go off and just do whatever automation you want. Or like in Paul's case and many other ICG members, where we have a established team that can do the automation for you. So they're still using our same product. You just give us the template, your tables, and any instructions we might need, and they'll set up the automation, run it for you, and then can rerun it subsequently if needed as well. Any project, PowerPoint, Google, like I said, and that can be a very efficient model for many, many people. So just to sort of summarize before we get into any questions, fully automated reporting can mean much, much more than just being handed a bunch of charts and then still having to spend ages fine-tuning those client deliverables. Automation gives you the chance to add value to what you're doing now. You can do it better and you can do more of it for less cost and faster turnaround. A bit of a no-brainer. Automation creates time, so you have both the bandwidth and the headspace to utilize your analytical skills to dig for additional and more deeper insights. The automation can even be initiated on dummy, interim, or previous wave data, like we said, so that when that final data is ready and available, you can just repopulate the slides in a few moments and deliver on time, or ahead of time even. And that can really delight the customer. And whilst talking about customers, enhancing the range of deliverables gives you ways to generate more revenue and maintain or grow profits. Smaller teams in particular can begin to consider pitching on larger, more complex projects than they ever would have dreamt of doing due to their natural lack of resources. And it also means that clients are happier, and it could well make the difference between keeping or losing a client or project, or the difference between becoming stale in a client's eyes or making tangible changes that will be mutually beneficial and promote you to being seen as their partner rather than just another supplier. And finally, as Paul said, even staff appreciate the automation. So instead of exercising their fingers preparing chart decks all day, all night perhaps, and having to check all their manual data entries, they can finally exercise their minds and be more creative and way less stressful too, with more confidence in the accuracy of their reporting. And that increased job satisfaction will translate into a happier team and company, especially when they don't need to spend their Sunday nights manually reporting to get it to the client by Monday morning. So that's it from me. Any questions?
Thanks, Benji and Paul. I've got a couple of questions. I think the first one is for Paul. If everyone else thinks about questions while I'm doing this, that'd be great. This one's probably for Paul. In this specific project you were talking about, Paul, and I know you've obviously had experience of working with ETABS over the years, but what was kind of had you sold when you sold the work you were going to do, was automation going to happen, or were you sort of halfway down the road and then you suddenly realized automation was coming in? Or
I can be honest or I can lie and say that we had this planned right from the start. We didn't. We thought we could do it ourselves, and then time crunch came and we had a couple of projects and they weren't budging on timings, and we said we have to do this, and that sounds like we did it begrudgingly. We absolutely didn't, and we knew that it would save time. It's just I think we didn't probably invest that time earlier on thinking about it basically. But yeah, there was no reticence to do it. It was just making sure that you plan it in, and we didn't do that, and we're really pleased that it kind of came to our rescue a little bit. Sorry, again, being a little bit simpering there, but it's true. It was funny when you were talking, Benjamin, there about delighting. We're running a project, and we're running a project at the moment. It's actually a tracking project, and I'd forgotten that we'd auto charted the first wave. and the second wave is happening now, and it made my heart skip a little bit, thinking I've actually don't have to do this the second time. So yeah, it's just a really nice way of running separate waves of projects. It just takes that one thing out of it.
Thanks. And just one other quick question from me, probably for Benji, although this might also apply to you, Paul, on other work you've done with eTabs. So you've kind of, when you've referenced the sort of input files you're using, you've referenced like a deck. What about if I've got kind of sorry, not a deck, like an Excel sheet or something? What if I've got like multiple formats? If I've got an Excel sheet and I've got another format of data that needs to all appear in the same report, is that something you can do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you can actually point to multiple places all at the same time. So you can have one chart, let's say on the slide, that's getting data from lots of disparate places. That's absolutely fine. And very often, if somebody's doing like a benchmark study, so they'll have these results and they want to compare them with the benchmark values or norm scores. That's very common.
Okay, brilliant. I don't know if we've got.
We can do calculations, so compare this wave with the previous wave and derive the difference, or the stat testing, or whatever it may be. So we
We
can
got like
automate
arrows pointing up and down and that kind of thing based on, yeah.
exactly all the derived values of the difference, that type of thing. Averages, mean scores, calculate top two box, bottom two box if it wasn't in the tables. So a lot of that fiddling can be part of the automation as well.
Great. I don't know if anyone else wants to
Mike
the
Dinsmore for a
microphone.
question.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, Mike, great.
Hey, so if I've got multiple PDFs of numerous presentations, 5 or 6 waves of data, broadly similar to each other with minor differences between each one, are we saying that we can feed all of this back into a centralized thing and recreate effectively a proper trend evaluation rather than treating each one as an individual standalone, which is how a project that I'm looking into at the moment has been operating? Very inefficiently is what I consider. And so I'm thinking this would be a godsend.
Right. So in principle, the answer is yes, not necessarily from PDFs though. So PDFs are very um, difficult to get data out of really
Yeah.
because of their mere format. But if we're talking about multiple Excel files, then that would be fine. So if you can go back a stage from the PDF and get the Excel that fed the PDF, then absolutely yes.
I can create some Excels from the PDFs and start from there.
Okay, yeah, as long as there's a good
So I get multiple decks of a presentation that purports to be the same thing over and over again,
right,
treated individually, bit of reference back to the past, but not much of what I would call proper tracker trend data.
right.
Maybe scan it, put it into Excel, and then start all over again with a long form trend analysis.
Potentially. I mean, yeah, by all means, share the project with us and in a
I
bit more,
would like to.
and we'll take a look at that.
Sample size is difficult to get to know exactly what they are, but I know broadly what they are each time. And that, again, I think needs to have significance testing done, on all the questions, basically, to see what the changes actually are rather than what they appear to be.
Right.
Hugely helpful, I think.
Yeah. No, definitely sounds like a nice one to look at.
Great. And you've got Benji's email on the screen at the
Yeah,
moment, Mike, hopefully.
yeah, we're in communication anyway. Thank you.
Brilliant. And then Jeff's posted a question. Could you share some parameters on, so this is for you, Benji, on the bureau service? What are the principles of your costing for records? Is it number of charts or?
Great, yeah, no, great question. It's definitely not the number of records. We don't care what the data is, if you like. It's more a case of how complex the output is going to be. So we'd look at your slides. If it's a 10 slide, it's 30 slides, whatever it may be. The complexities within that, the number of parts, perhaps the requirement for stat testing. Maybe stat testing is already in the tables, and all we're doing is pulling it in, or maybe you need us to do the calculation of the stat testing and render it as arrows or whatever it might be. So that sort of thing gives an idea of the complication, and then we'd build the costing based on how long it would take us to do the automation. So, for example, in Paul's case, and obviously not mentioning cost, but just the principle of it. If you've got what was it, 16 slides, I think it was. If you got 16 slides, let's say, times 12 markets, 14 markets, that's a lot of slides. And somebody comes to us and say, look, I've got 150 slides or 180 slides, whatever the maths is. How much does it cost to automate 180 slides? But we'll say, let's look at those 180 slides, because if in fact it's just the same 10, 14 slides repeated over and over, then the setup is usually based on 10 or 14 slides rather than 180, because we're replicating those segments. So it's always worth sharing whatever the deck looks like with us, and then we can give some sort of idea of costing and turn.
Brilliant. And of course, the other option, if you're doing this regularly yourselves, and you can buy the ETAB software as well as using the bureau. So we've hit the 3:31 mark in the UK. So a half hour's over. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Our late lunch and learn session, and hopefully see you at an ICG session soon. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Benji.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Pleasure.